So now what we're going to do is we're going to revisit an earlier case study, except we're going to look at it from a new perspective, and we're going to show off some other cool concurrency features. And this will begin our segue into the next topic we'll be covering, which is how to write multiple microservices and manage and control them. So this is the last discussion that we're going to have where we still just have a single microservice, and you'll see kind of why we do that. So this is the BerraQuotes test example. And we talked about this much earlier in the class. It might have been one of the very first things we talked about. And what I've done here is I've refactored this to have a wider range of BerraQuotes strategies because I want to show off a couple of interesting things. And as always, give you a chance to compare and contrast how stuff works. So just a recap of this example shows how you can use Spring WebMVC to send and receive HTTP GET requests to and from several microservice implementation strategies using synchronous communication. That's what Spring WebMVC does. We'll start moving beyond that next week or so. As before, the client can send requests individually or in bulk. The microservice that gets that can receive the request individually or in bulk, depending on what the requests are. And the BerraQuotes controller takes the incoming requests and converts them into native Java types, forwards them to the BerraQuotes service, which in turn then forwards them to the appropriate strategy. And there's a bunch of different strategies. There's a parallel stream strategy and a sequential stream strategy and a structured concurrency strategy and so on and so forth. The project is structured in a more interesting way than we had looked at when we looked at it before. The server side has a lot more stuff in it because we've got all these different strategies. I'm going to show you a really fun strategy that does some really cool things with regular expressions that are neat. And then it's got the common stuff like the constants and the server beans and the quote schema and so on. And then there's a general purpose utilities folder that has the future util stuff. That should all look very familiar to you because we do that for the assignments as well. And then finally, there's a resources directory that contains the name and the port number. Then there's also a test, which is a Spring Boot test, which means it can automatically launch the server in order to be able to, the microservice rather, in order to be able to run it and get the results and do stuff with the results. There's also a client directory, which has the various quote clients. There's a bunch of ones for the different types of requests we're making. And then there's also a proxy that's shared. And then there's also the client beans, which are used to customize the client. We'll see that that's used primarily in order to be able to select which port number to use and also to be able to set up a connection pool. Remember, connection pools are important when you start using virtual threads on the client because otherwise you can run out of connection resources. Even though you may have gobs of threads, you can have hundreds of thousands or millions of threads. Not at this point, you really can't have hundreds of thousands or millions of open sockets. So that pools things together so that you aren't going to run out of those resources on the client side. And the use of the client bean and the ability to transparently add in connection pooling through dependency injection is a very cool feature that you should be aware of as well. Then there's a utils folder that has a bunch of reusable helper classes. My general rule here, just in case you're ever curious, is stuff that can be reused between different projects, things like testing how long it takes to run code, or things for making HTTP GET requests or POST requests, or generating random numbers. Those things go into the utils folder. And then the stuff that's more that's more specific for a particular example goes in the common folder, because it's sometimes shared between the client and the microservice. So that's the end of just a quick walkthrough of the app case study, just kind of reminding you what this was about. This is an extension of what we've covered before, adding in some cool new features.